What's up, guys? Welcome back to Before the Whistle. I'm your host, Maddie Hudak, and we are back with our regular guests on Friday. And I could not be more excited about this week's guest. Brooke Kirchhofer, one of my best friends, and who works with New Orleans Football now and has done just an excellent job in her coverage, both in television on WWL and transitioning over to New Orleans Football. It's just been such a pleasure to be friends with her and really share kind of a similar background coming into this industry, having that soccer background and just really identifying with athletes off the bat due to that. But I really appreciated kind of learning how she found her way into this industry, growing up watching sports with her dad. It just paralleled a lot of what I came to fall in love with this sport as well. And just, I've always loved the way that she does storytelling. And she really started being such a key component of telling Tulane's story last season, and it does not go unnoticed. Just the fact that, we talk about how she covered several successful SEC programs in, the top of the top in Auburn, Alabama, and Georgia, I believe, but being able to tell just as good of stories and realizing that all college football fans, they're really more in common than they are different. And I really appreciated how she kind of took me through that. So without further ado, Brooke Kirchhofer. Well, you're no longer in TV, but as I've known you, my entire time knowing you, you've always been covering sports on television. I'm just curious, kind of, was that always the dream for you, or what was kind of your journey into broadcasting?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. And I talked to my friends about this too from home is we usually go to college and you try to figure it out, right? That's usually the path. That was not the path for me at all. So I'll take you back to like Pennsylvania days, like growing up in Philly, and my dad would get home from work and he was like, look, if I come home from work, find a ball on the TV. So it was always sports, no matter what, maybe a little bit of NASCAR. And so growing up in that mindset that we always were watching either Sports Center or one of the sports networks growing up. And then obviously being involved in sports once I was old enough and got really involved with soccer. And I knew when I was in high school that professional women's soccer isn't what it was today. Back then it was, if you wanted to play professionally, you pretty much had to have a second job. And I was like, I don't think that's the path for me. I don't want to be a teacher on the side, which is typically what the road was for some of my friends who went on to play professionally or try to play professionally. And so when I was in high school, I thought, okay, I'm going to try to play Division I soccer. But after that, I don't really want to give up sports. So in high school, I made the decision. I said, look, I want to continue to be around sports. The reason why I love being around sports is the stories and the people and everything about that. I know that's part of your journey too, Maddie, wanting to be involved in sports. It's not just about the X's and O's, it's about the people. And that's honestly what I love about this new show that you've got going on too, is you're big on that.
No, girl, I think that's kind of how we bonded initially in the press box. And we kind of both talked about our soccer backgrounds, but it just kind of, to me, having that athletic background, there's just a sense of empathy and I guess understanding of situations like we've talked about injuries all the time, where for me, at least, I try to at least offer that perspective, even though it's not necessarily the same sport. I just feel like a lot of the mentality carries over.
Yeah, no, it really does. And that's one of the things that I've learned. Look, like if we go way back. So after high school, went and played soccer at Lamar and was there for 4 years, ended up getting an awesome broadcast journalism degree. I got to work interned with the Houston Astros. I worked for an ESPN3 affiliate on campus. I was like, okay, this is truly what I want to do. I want to get into this field, sports journalism, sports broadcasting. And I remember when I got to Columbus, Georgia, which was my first market 127, you got to pick your start somewhere. In this industry, it was more so wherever you get your first job, it's a yes, you go. And so I went to Columbus, Georgia, and you're thinking you're going to be covering more college sports or even professional sports, but I was actually covering a lot of high school sports and really got to get to know kind of the mentality and mindset of some of these football players. It's a little bit different too, growing up in a different sport in soccer. And for me, that was how I started to at least be able to understand kind of like the psyche of the guys as they go from high school to college, now the NFL, and having a greater appreciation for what these guys truly go through.
Yeah, because I mean, as women, obviously there's, I guess, flag football leagues now, and there is some level of professional football for women. But I mean, we're talking about how difficult it was to get into professional soccer just a couple of years ago. So the idea of ever playing a snap of football is just never there. But how have you kind of bridged that gap? Do you draw from your athletic background, or have you really just kind of studied the game of football, or what kind of brought you all together with that?
I would say a little bit of both. It's definitely studying the game. And I think you would say the same too, especially when you're trying to understand the NFL. It's a little bit different than when you're covering high school sports or high school football on a Friday night, or even college football on Saturday. It really changes when you get to the NFL and just the understanding of the game and trying to break things down. And we don't necessarily do that in a lot of local television on that grand scheme of things. You're kind of just saying, the breakdown of the game as far as like keys to the game or the story of the game, things like that. And now with New Orleans football, it's really getting into it and breaking it down. And for me, it's just reps over time. So I've been covering the Saints since 2019. And as each year goes by, it's a better understanding of the game. But I actually had my dad's friend who's a defensive coordinator up in Pennsylvania. I called him up and I was like, look, treat me like I am one of your brand new guys to the program who treat me like I'm a high school kid, right? Coming in as a freshman. And I want you to break it all down for me. And so we'd go through his huddle of what the teams that he was actually coaching, and we'd break it down. Each week we met in the morning. I think it was like on a Thursday or something. And we would just go through different coverages, just the terminology, the different gaps, things like that. I mean, head to toe broke everything down. And that's really helped me with helping tell the story. Like, I'm not necessarily breaking down film, right, on New Orleans football, but we are doing that in a sense as we're talking about the game and why their Saints are either struggling in one area or why they're doing well in another area. You kind of have to know the basics of the game.
Yeah, to me, at least, like you said, it's really different on every level. But in the NFL, I just found I was kind of lacking the necessary context to an extent where you could see things kind of going wrong in one level of the defense, for example, but without having that kind of scouting background. It almost kind of feels like I don't want to kind of pick on the wrong person, not to say that you're ever picking on someone, but I think just being able to tell a story correctly. And at least from my perspective, obviously, like coming into this industry, I had less of a conventional background, but to me, there's definitely an authority issue with being a woman trying to cover football. And so it's unfortunate to me, but I have kind of found that as something that makes people take the storytelling component seriously, which is kind of annoying, but that's at least been how I've seen it.
Yeah, and Maddie, it's funny if you look at some of the markets around the country. So like, let's take New Orleans, for example. A lot of the men that cover the Saints have never snapped a football, have never been on a football field, have never been in between the lines. So I hate that narrative of like, oh, like the women have it harder. We shouldn't. Like, I play Division I soccer. I know, like, and that's to me where I've been given like a greater appreciation for what they do in the NFL. Like, I went through that fall camp in Beaumont, Texas, where it's 115 degrees outside, and we didn't get that hour-long period. Like, we did the 2.5 hours out there, the grueling heat, the throwing up, the like, you just sometimes pass out at practice. So that part of it, and going through that, 4 years of fall camp, a grueling soccer schedule, the mental aspect of it all, of getting through it, concussions, injuries, while also working a job and going to school. And like, these guys that are NFL athletes, a lot of them have kids, they're taking care of their foundations, things like, so from that perspective, I have a greater appreciation for what these guys do. But the whole narrative of that, the whole beat that covers New Orleans has played in the NFL or played college football or even played high school football. To me, it's got to get away from that. And it's, anybody can cover this sport if you, number one, put the time and knowledge into it, like the studying of the game, and just number one, really appreciate, try to figure out a way that you can appreciate what these guys are doing. If you can't physically put yourself through what they're doing, try to at least mentally understand what they're going through. And for me, that's at least help with when you mentioned, if you're trying not to be hard on a guy. So we've been like kind of harping on Alontae Taylor in camp. Look, he is still one of the better second-year cornerbacks in the NFL right now. I'm not saying he's top 5, top 10, but he's a kid who is going to do well in this league. When you're being compared to guys like Marshon Lattimore and Paulson Adebo, who have been the proven starters for the Saints, it's a little, and that's where the knocks come on him. But being able to understand that and recognizing that these guys play in the NFL, like, they're good at what they do.
No, I agree with you. And that's, I think, a really good example, because I've just kind of followed along Alontae Taylor, and he was so impressive his rookie season. And yeah, he really hasn't been that great during camp. But I think, again, just bringing up the comparative thing, when you're talking about him being in a room with Marshon Lattimore and Paulson Adebo, that probably outplay a lot of cornerback rooms in general. And Alontae Taylor is probably starting easy on several teams. But it is kind of that balance. And that's kind of, at least for me, and especially when it's like a hamstring injury or high ankle sprain or things like that, it kind of bothers me sometimes how people almost blame the athletes and are thinking,
Right.
like, why aren't they working harder to get back out there? Why don't they just tape up their ankle? And just kind of talk me through what your thoughts are when you hear that stuff, having the background as an athlete that's gotten injured a lot.
Yeah, well, it's almost like they think the athlete wants to get injured. Like, no, like these guys want to be on the field healthy. Number one, too, it's not just that they're playing for fun. This is their livelihood. This is their job every single day. So money is on the line with these guys as well. And like I said, they have foundations, they have families, like people answer to them, they answer to people. The narrative of injuries in with NFL fan bases, I just never understood it. Of they're like so mad that it took Michael Thomas so long to get back, or why did it take Marshawn Lattimore? Like Marshawn Lattimore had lacerated kidneys. I mean, it's a pretty serious injury, and you don't think. I think people need to remember too. These training staffs are paid a lot of money, and they go out and get some of the best trainers across the nation to help heal these guys and get them back as quickly as possible, while also making sure they're playing at the top of their game. This isn't like your high school football Friday night where it's like, hey, like just tape the ankle up and get back out there. Like, no, these guys need to make sure that they have longevity in the game as well, too. You don't want to be forced back from an injury and great, you play 2-3 games, maybe add a win or so, and then that injury continues to get worse maybe, and then you're out for the rest of the year and maybe your NFL career's over. Like, no, I mean, there's got to be an understanding of these injuries are much more serious than people think with these guys.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it's a difficult conversation in New Orleans, just kind of like you said, and then thinking that guys are avoiding surgery when, I mean, my mom literally tripped on a piece of carpet and hurt herself. It can happen that fast, but they're really trying to avoid surgery with her because you don't want to just have unnecessary procedures done to your body, add scar tissue. But I've at least found the college fandom to be a little more reasonable. I don't know if that's just kind of a small sample size for me, but I kind of like how you brought up how you really had to focus on the storytelling aspect of high school, because you're right. I mean, there's only so much X's and O's discussion, if any, that you can really be having at that level. And then when you get to the NFL, I think it's just, like you said, necessary context in tandem with a lot of those other things, but it ultimately is their professional job. And I found college to just be like an intriguing balance of that, because it does have that more professional feel, and especially with athletes getting paid nowadays, but you have to remember that they're ultimately kids at that point.
And honestly, I see them as two totally different sports. I know it's football. Sorry, Matt, I need to take a drink of water. My throat is so dry. I knew it was coming. We'll just pause there. I'll pick it back. I'll just pick it back up. The question. Is that good? Okay.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Yeah, for me, I honestly look at college football as the NFL as being two entirely different sports altogether, because what you get at the college football level is so different than the NFL. You talk about storylines. I mean, that's a big part of it with college football. And you don't play as many games in college. You play a lot more games in the NFL. The schedule's a little bit more different in the NFL. With college, you have like the true rivalries, like the Iron Bowl. I can think of a lot more, obviously, in town, like Tulane and Southern Miss. That's going to be a game to watch. I know you're looking forward to that one as well. It's more of a get back game for Tulane, but man, I just love covering college sports and being on the sidelines. It's just, to me, they're still kids, so they're not professionals yet. And the stories that you can tell with these guys, like Tajay Spears and the triumph of his story, being able to come back from injury, and some of the stuff he just dealt with mentally. And then now, as he's going over to the NFL and what he hopefully is going to be able to accomplish with the Tennessee Titans, I still am going to hold on to those stories that I learned about him in college more so than I would the stories of him in the NFL. And that's why I still hold on to the college football. And I'm excited that we're still going to be able to cover college sports here with New Orleans Football with an LSU and Tulane show coming up this fall.
Oh, I mean, I can't wait, because I really appreciate your kind of presence at Tulane, especially towards the end of last season. And it does stick out to me that the players trust you and tell you these kinds of stories. And for, not really kind of being around until the end of the year, at least kind of on those regular covering the game basis, how did you kind of gain the trust of those guys so early on? Because I remember being there for your Tajay story, and really, like, he is just a complete open book with you.
I think it's a tough balance. I think showing your face so I was there start to finish every single Tuesday, press conference, at practice. I was at the majority of the home games. I know we didn't necessarily do a lot of the away games during the regular season, but number one, when you're trying to build those relationships, make sure those players see you at a lot of what they do, whether that's practices or games. So they know that number one, you're invested and you care. And also, kind of what they're going through. A lot of these national heads come in during the week and it's like, hey, tell me everything about you. And it's like, you're not really going to get that and gain that respect from a player and just that small interaction before you would do a broadcast on a Saturday. And so I think consistency and them seeing you often helps. I think the way you ask questions to some of these players, and they appreciate honesty, like not just like you go in and ask the basic questions or kind of like stroke their ego. If you're open and honest with these players about like what's going on during the season, and maybe it's like a give and take, maybe that's where it comes from. Honestly, I can't really explain why Tajay and I just clicked, but he's somebody that, you're right. Like we both were, I think it was both sided. We both were able to be open with each other, and he trusted me enough to kind of share his story with me. And I was so grateful for that, because a lot of people listened to it and kind of related to a lot of the things that he was dealing with.
Yeah, and I mean, it really like does just a lot for Tulane's program. And I mean, I'm really biased here, but I do think that they just have such high character guys there with like a lot of unfortunate tragedy and triumph type backgrounds. But I really think I saw the beauty in storytelling more kind of in the way that you found it in high school, because I really didn't pay attention to college sports whatsoever, even when I went to Tulane, because they just were not a good team. And neither of my parents had a college football team that they followed. And so I always just followed the Saints. So this is all really new for me. But, did you follow a college team growing up, or how did you almost kind of find your way into college sports, including I know that you spent time on the sideline?
I did not. I mean, I know I went to Lamar, but we didn't really have a good football team, to be honest. But I didn't really cover a college football team closely at all. I mean, I grew up an Eagles fan, but that was kind of the only real team I followed. I ended up following the Astros later on in life after I interned with them. But when I was in college, I was playing soccer. I was the athlete on the field that was busy trying to figure out the plays that week, studying the opponent, making sure I was going to class, and then also working on the features around all of this, which to me, like nothing will be as challenging as it was my 4 years in college with all of that. Now I kind of just get to have fun and tell the stories and do this job. But no, I didn't really cover. Here's what I fell in love with. I fell in love with the people. I fell in love with the people and the stories. And my dad was kind of like this too growing up, where we liked watching certain teams because of their quarterback or because of a player on the team that we fell in love with and loved their story. So for me, I mean, as cliche as it sounds, I've always been a story person, and that's why I've maybe been able to tell these stories so far in my career.
No, it makes sense. And that's weird because my dad and I kind of used to do the same thing where we just kind of like to watch certain coaches or certain quarterbacks, like you said, and just really kind of enjoy the cerebral discussion around it. And so was college sports really something that you got into when you came down to New Orleans? As those, I think between LSU and Tulane, at least, you kind of get the full landscape of like the college football experience of really, the top dogs to kind of the underdogs that made quite a bit of a splash last year.
Oh no, it started well before that. I dove right into SEC country when I was out in Georgia. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. So in 2017, I covered Alabama, Auburn, and Georgia. And if you remember that college football season, all three of those schools were the number one team in the country at some point during that college football season. It was so much fun to cover. I covered Georgia and Alabama in the national championship that year in 2018, but it was the 2017 season. Auburn, of course, had a great year. I covered them in their bowl game. And so covering those three fan bases, how can you not fall in love with college football and just diving right into the SEC, which to me is king, no matter what people say. I think I know everything's been changing with conference realignment and stuff like that, but that's to me is where I fell in love with college football. And then I, of course, growing up in Houston, I always heard about LSU and LSU baseball, what Paul Mainieri was building there. So when I got the job in Baton Rouge, I was so excited to stay in SEC country and kind of have an understanding of what the fan base wants as far as my storytelling and reporting when covering LSU. And then coming to New Orleans and covering Tulane, I really didn't know much about the Green Wave, to be perfectly honest with you. I knew their baseball team had been really good way back in the day, but man, has this been a fun team to cover. I got very lucky, of course, the incredible turnaround season last year and winning the Cotton Bowl. I will say I've been very fortunate to cover winning teams as I've covered college sports over the years.
Well, I was going to kind of ask you if you ever really did cover a 2-10 type season. So I guess the answer is no. But I mean, starting in like SEC country, I'm sure it is kind of different. And you said you kind of learned, what SEC fans were looking for, what LSU fans were looking for in kind of a distinguishing way. What did you kind of find that G5 programs and Tulane fans were really looking for last season and really heading into this year?
Honestly, it's so similar. Like college football fans in general are all kind of looking for the same thing. It's the passion for the sport, the passion for the school. Like no matter what school it was, you could be Lamar or you could be, the Alabamas of the world, but you're still gonna support your school. And I mean, that's something I've learned with Tulane as well. It doesn't matter where you go. Like these people, if you win, like they will come out. And we saw that with the sellout crowds at the end of the season for Tulane, and how awesome that tickets are already getting sold out for this upcoming year. I think truly that's just what fans are looking for. Number one, they want to see team or players invested in the program. Winning helps. Winning will bring the fan base around, but it is those stories you can think about on Saturdays watching ESPN College Game Day. And how many times did Tom Rinaldi bring the house down, making everybody cry about these just incredible stories that surround these teams? And that's in every team across the country, any college football team, they are going to have these incredible stories. And if you're telling them, the fan base is going to be more interested in that team.
No, 100%. The only thing I will say is I remember that all of you guys that had the SEC backgrounds, when the crowd did end up rushing the field, all of you guys knew to go find the offensive lineman and like get behind them. And I realized in that moment that I was just completely like a fish out of water. But I think that was really the first time that Tulane fans, I think, felt even, at least, I mean, they used to beat LSU back in the day, I should say, but the 21st century, like that feeling of euphoria, I think it was really the first comparable moment that I could think of in those kind of things. But I mean, I think that you probably know the tricks of the trade a little bit better when it comes to those types of moments covering the SEC, especially Auburn, Alabama, and Georgia.
Oh, yeah. So my first field rush that I experienced was Auburn beating Alabama in the Iron Bowl at home on the Plains. And I was like, what the heck do I do? And I'm, smaller girl with this like 50-pound camera over my head, like knowing if I break it, that's my job. It's over and done with. And I'm trying to get off the field. And I think his name was Deshaun Davis. Yeah, Deshaun Davis. He was a linebacker for Auburn. And I'm trying to get out of this crowd, trying to beeline to also get there for post-game interviews. And I feel somebody grab my back. And I'm like, who the heck is grabbing onto me? Like, I'm just trying to get out of here. It was him in full pads and a helmet on. And I was like, no, switch with me, get up around me, and I'll follow you into the locker room. This does not make sense. You have full pads and a helmet on. And so I've definitely learned the tricks of the trade with trying to find at least a big football player that also has to get to the post-game locker room. But the thing for Tulane, and I think I might have told you the story, Maddie, Justin Ibieta, I think had like a week or two left in his sleeve after surgery, or he might have just had gotten cleared to get his arm out of the sleeve. I'm not sure, but obviously he just had surgery on his shoulder, and he's looking around like, oh, here comes everybody. And I was like, you need to get out of here. Like, I don't think you understand what's about to happen. This nice little surgery you just had that I'm sure is very fresh could potentially wind up in a new injury if you don't get out of here. And he learned very quickly that when you have a Tulane fan base that does the incredible and wins a conference championship for the first time, they're all coming out of the stands. And it was crazy. Honestly, I think I was more packed in the Tulane game than I was in the Iron Bowl, just because it was the pandemonium of this happening for the first time, since the 90s. And so when people aren't used to that, they just don't know what to do. And everybody's just running everywhere with their chicken with their head cut off.
No, the speed at which that crowd like became extremely compact was honestly really frightening, because I had to really go against my instincts and run straight into the student section because they were kneeling down in the end zone and I was supposed to find players. I'm like, this is quite literally the worst place for this game to end. And then I kind of had a panic attack, honestly, and had to like escape because I was like, I'm 5'3", I can't get out of here. But
you can't breathe. The air sucked out. I'm telling you, it's like a stampede. You don't know what to do.
No, and I'm also such a paranoid person, but like there's all these like crowd crush things that have happened, but like it just goes to show you it really like because if you look at pictures from it, there's a lot of space still on the field, but everyone just like really wanted to get right up on each other. And so I think I found like 4 players over the course of 15 minutes, but it's just funny because I don't think any of them really knew how to act. Like Tajay just started screaming into the microphone. I'm like, all right, I don't really know what to do with this. But, just covering again, I think teams and players that are a little more used to that level of success. What was it kind of like just seeing those Tulane players on the field after that?
Oh, it was amazing. It would listen, I was MMJing that game, so there was a little bit of pandemonium on my part as like, how am I going to get this job done? Like my batteries are about to die. I need to make sure that I'm saving whatever hair and makeup is left on my face so that I can get in front of the camera after this and do my own job. So all these things are swirling about, but as soon as we got into the celebration at the end where they kind of rope everybody off, that's when it really set in that, wow, look at this team. I mean, this is a team that was at the end of the season was ranked higher than LSU, which you know how much of a big deal that is in the state of Louisiana. Tulane football has always been the little brother to LSU football that could just never compete. I mean, it was a huge deal, not just for the city of New Orleans, but for the state, and Tulane really bringing another, even though they're a group or not a Power 5 school, a Group of 5 school, putting the state of Louisiana on notice at the national level for what they were doing, to me was just incredible. And you mentioned Tajay Spears just screaming. I think all the players were, none of them knew what to do. It was just a really cool experience to be there.
Yeah, and then I didn't think it could be topped, and then Arlington happened, and honestly, LSU did Tulane the biggest favor ever by beating the pants off of Purdue like so early in that game, and it kind of felt like that again, where I've just talked to so many family members, just extended friends that have all said they were all in these LSU bars, and everyone was like, turn on the Tulane game, and
Yeah.
when you think about the fact that like 2 Louisiana teams won 2 of the New Year's 6 bowl games, I just think it made really such a difference for, like you said, the state of Louisiana, but that game, I mean, literally came down to the final 4 minutes. At what point did you kind of sense that things were turning around in that game? I'm just
I hate to
curious.
say this, I'll chalk it up. When I think it was right at the beginning of the third quarter. We're all upstairs in the press box and we were like, well, great season for Tulane. Like, sad to see it come this way, but look, it's the Heisman Trophy winner. It is what it is. Honestly, we thought they were losing the game, hands down. So we start packing up our stuff. We're like, let's just go watch the rest of the game from the sideline, which we were allowed to do for that bowl game. So as we're going down, we start hearing things change and turn in the stadium. And so we get down there and like, what the heck happened? And right in front of us, we see them get the safety. And we're like, oh, this is a ball game. And I remember looking at you, Maddie. I remember looking at the stand. I remember somebody
I had no idea you were
the
there.
sideline, and they were like, what are you doing? Get up. Like, to the fans, like, we are not out of this. And then the juice started to come back with the fan base. And then, of course, Michael Pratt driving down, and it's the freshman tight end who has the game-winning I mean, unbelievable. I don't think I've ever covered, maybe Alabama putting Tua Tagovailoa in. Like, that was to me a big turning moment of a game that I've covered. But this was just unbelievable. This was a team that was, what were they down, Maddie? Like 14 points at halftime or something like that, something crazy like that.
Yeah.
And or honestly, I think they were down by 14 leading into the third quarter. I mean, we truly thought this game was over. No qualms about Tulane, though. We were like, great season. It's all right that they ended it this way. And of course, they're like, nope, we're going to continue to prove people wrong and even prove the media wrong, who was upstairs thinking they had a great season and it would have been okay to end that way. No, they changed the national narrative for Tulane in that Cotton Bowl game. And that's why you see people like Michael Pratt now is up on the list for Heisman candidates. I mean, we would have never said this 2 years ago, but he has made the necessary steps that he might be able to, depending on what Tulane is able to do in this conference. And if they dominate, his name is going to be in that conversation. And we went out to a Tulane practice. He has made the necessary steps to make the next step in his game as a quarterback. I mean, he just looks more comfortable moving around the pocket, and just some of the things now with Slade Nagel. I think those two having that chemistry going is working for Pratt under center. So we'll see what happens, but that game was incredible. Tajay Spears post-game interview, top 5 in my career. And Tajay Spears solidified why he needed to be in the top 3 rounds of the NFL draft. Proved it right in that game.
Yeah, I mean, he literally changed his life in that
Yeah.
game, but I almost feel like they did you guys a favor by kind of getting blown out, not to like totally blown out, but I mean, honestly, we were all having the same thought. It was kind of reminiscent of when the Saints were in the Super Bowl and it was like, yeah, it's Peyton Manning. We're just kind of happy to be here kind of thing. And then like pandemonium ensued. That was kind of the same feeling, but I feel like at least talking to Corey and Steve, like they didn't even see really the size of the Tulane crowd, just how the press box was situated for them. So I just feel like you guys being down on the sideline by just chance of thinking that the game was over. I was actually always wondering why you guys were all down there, and it never really made sense to me. And then I didn't realize that it was really like the entire media group kind of going down there. But I think that really like definitely changed the experience. Like I said, I literally had no idea that you guys saw me or were down there at all.
Yeah, no, we were. The first thing we thought was, where are our microphones? Like, we're doing post-game interviews on the field. Like, Jason, you're just gonna have to tell the Cotton Bowl people that they're just not gonna be able to keep us off the field. Like, the security was trying to tell us you can't run on the field, and I was like, yeah, okay. Like, this place is about to erupt. So you're gonna have to worry about like fans jumping out of the stands. The media is gonna run onto the field. It is what it is. Just let it happen. It was just crazy seeing how that all came about. And I don't think it hit anybody. I mean, the trophy celebration, post-game interviews, I don't think it really set in just the magnitude of that game, probably a few days later for everybody, to be honest.
Oh, without question. It's just, again, like I'm just replaying the final drive in my head. It's just like every improbable thing. Like there were 2 fourth down conversions that were, I believe, 4th and 6 and 4th and 10 with a minute left and no timeouts or starting tight ends go out. Deuce Watts gets knocked out. And then it's literally Alex Bauman and Michael Pratt. Like it just doesn't happen. And it also usually doesn't happen where a team fumbles out at the 1 and then not being able to make a stop all game. I found it really interesting, at least watching Tulane these last couple of weeks. Every time they're in doing situational football, they've been starting every single drive exactly at the 1 yard line. And I don't think that's by coincidence.
Oh, it can't be. That's definitely Willie Fritz saying, we will be in this moment again. Let's make sure we handle it like we did before. That's absolutely by design.
Yeah, it's just they're so situational football there. And that might be one of my more favorite things about covering them is just how precise and deliberate everything is. And like I had this weird sense of calm in that final drive because I've seen them do this hurry up drill literally like every single day of practice for the last 2 years straight. Now, granted, it was different players in there. I also learned from Slade Nagel earlier this week that Alex Bauman was kind of injured the first half of last season. So maybe he had this in him all along and we just really didn't know it. But I mean, I just remember holding Fat Watts' hand like on the 4th and 10, thinking like they've already converted a 4th and 6. How they're not gonna be able to do like a 4th and 10 again. But that was really kind of the first moment that I realized, I think, how good of a quarterback Michael Pratt was, in the sense that I felt this weird confidence that he would be able to get it done. And I just think when you're looking at what NFL teams are looking for, I think, arm talent and ability to improvise gets sometimes blown out of proportion. But to me, like mental toughness and that clutch ability, it was the first game that he really reminded me of Drew Brees.
Oh, well, that was a heck of a comparison, Maddie. But no, quarterbacks being able to ad lib like that, it does not go unnoticed. One of the things you mentioned too, the fact that after the fact, the players had said like, no, this is what we've done in practice, kind of blew my mind a little bit, because in a moment like that, it's almost like, how can you be so methodical in practice and just bring that to the field? But it goes back to that. I mean, Sincere Haynesworth, as he was more or less yelling it at us during post-game interviews because he was just so excited. And if you know Sincere Haynesworth, he was just like a big ball of energy after they won the game. And he's like, no, like I knew it when we did this. I was like, we did this in practice. We know what's going to happen. We're going to win this game. I mean, they were so sure when they rolled out that play that it was going to work and that they were going to go on and win this game. I mean, it's truly crazy.
Yeah, no, I just said the Drew Brees thing just because I always had these moments where it was like the defense would kind of screw up for the Saints, but then it was like, oh, he's coming back in. Everything's going to be okay. And I was like very surprised at how comfortable I felt in that situation, because I unfortunately wasn't at the Oklahoma game. But to me, that was really like all I needed to see, at least what I'm looking from like a scouting perspective. I've always kind of had trouble, I guess, identifying what mental toughness really looks like. And that to me is the biggest trait that I've seen out of Michael Pratt by far.
To take it a step further, remember at halftime, what did he have? Like 10, 15 passing yards? He was not throwing
With
the
like
ball
2
well
completions.
that
Yeah.
game at all. It was the Tajay Spears show. And that's why for me, when I went downstairs at the beginning of the third quarter, I was like, this game's over. Like whatever it is, like Michael Pratt just does not have his stuff. He's not in the right mindset. And he just went on to show that no, like he does have it in his bag. And credit to this quarterback who has been through hell and back. I mean, we saw, you know, that he lost his brother a month ago. What this kid has been through, you know, he lost his best friend in high school and now has lost his brother. There's not a stronger quarterback and a better leader than Michael Pratt right now for this Tulane football team. I truly believe that. And I think, you know, God tests us all in different ways. He's definitely tested Michael in ways that I'll never be able to understand. But I think based on the things he's been through and the things he's gotten through and now wants to lead this team and also staying at Tulane too. He had an opportunity to leave. The fact that he stayed at Tulane, it should get fans really excited for this football season, especially when you look at the scale of you look at the conference and the teams that have left, the teams that have been added in. Tulane should win the conference this year.
Oh, I agree. And apparently the preseason polls too, which is really weird. But no, I mean, I'm almost kind of, you know, like almost afraid for the draft to come because it's just, I know Michael Pratt has gone through genuinely so much tragedy. And I know that gets just spun into these really just kind of crass stories a lot of the time, but really just what this kid's gone through off the field. But then also to look at what he's gone through on the field these last 3 seasons as well. I mean, he's had a different offensive coordinator every single year that I've been there and has injured himself, you know, every single season he was playing through, like just an astonishing amount of pain in that 2-10 season. And, you know, he probably could have left after that year as well. And I agree that leadership that Michael Pratt really has brought to this team, it probably to me is what I think has kind of left me to remain somewhat confident, not somewhat, I'm actually pretty confident in this team doing well again. And I know that for me, at least, I have to admit that I have like the homer bias going on, and I had the same feeling last year, but I think if he leaves, it's a completely different situation. If Willie Fritz leaves, it's a completely different situation. But those two coming back and then adding in Sincere Haynesworth and a lot of really good coaches over from the Saints, to be honest with you, just seeing, you know, Greg McMahon and what he's been able to do for special teams and just the attention to detail they've already done already. I mean, I am really looking forward to this season.
I'll tell you what, when I was out at practice the other day with the NOF team, I saw some freshman wide receivers that I'm really excited about. I believe it's number 15. I kept calling him Stretch Man. He went up and his catch radius is stupid. I mean, I was thinking, who is this kid? Like, it looked like when he extended up that if you were to measure him, like if he was holding his hand straight up, like he'd be 8 feet tall. It was unbelievable, the catch he made. And then he made another catch later on in practice that was just insane. So you have Lawrence Keys come back. You have Jaquan Jackson. You add in a couple of freshman receivers that look good. Yes, you lose Tajay, but you bring in that big bully freshman running back. I can't think of his name right now, but man,
Arnold Duda Barnes,
humongous. Like he's going to bulldozer people in this season. And you have the other Celestine, there's veteran leadership in that running back room that's going to help bring him along. And as we've seen with Tulane, they like to use multiple running backs throughout the course of a game. You pretty much bring back 4 of your 5 starters on the offensive line, and then you add in a power 5 left tackle. So you're good there with Cam Wire as your starting left tackle. Quarterback situation is good. The defense, that's where the big question is, who's going to fill Dorian Williams and Nick Anderson's very large holes that are left behind in that linebacker core. But outside of that, I still think they bring back a lot of talent on their defense. Special teams, they bring back their guys as well. So it's shaping up to be a good season for Tulane. They just have to put it together.
Yeah, I just think about all of the transfer portal additions, really. And like you said, just Arnold Duda Barnes, who to me is just built like Michael Turner. And you don't get guys that come around that are just that like stocky and thick, but he's really quick. And I really just think the biggest thing for him is going to be like learning the pass protection part, because that was such a critical component of Tajay's game. But then to your point about the 4 O-line starters coming back, and I saw Cam Wire actually kind of like going at it with Keith Cooper today in a one-on-one drill, like going to the floor and everything. And it's just really good to see, I think, like that level of competition every single day, because they just like can't take their foot off the gas pedal at this point. But I just think about the additions that they've made and the fact that a lot of these players say that they want to come play for a winner and come play for Tulane. But you know, you look at Dante Fleming and Yoel Keith Brown and Chris Carter coming over, and those are all additions on the receiver core. And then they have Shedro Lewis coming in at running back too, who looks like Darren Sproles. He's like 5'8", but he's really, really fast. I think he's returned at least, I think 4 kickoffs for touchdowns. And you can tell that he has, honestly, that was to me perhaps the only weakness of Tajay was he didn't really have the long acceleration speed. This guy can go at it, at 100 miles per hour the entire length of the field. So I'm really looking forward to the scrimmage on Saturday, because to me, there does get to be a point in training camp where, especially trenches wise and like linebacker, for example, I don't really know what plays they're able to make a lot of the time in practice. I think that's kind of where you see those guys start to separate, at least, in a scrimmage setting.
Yeah, I know it's a day off for us on Saturday, so I might just have to get out there and go watch this scrimmage because I've got a lot of questions too. And like I said, we're going to be covering this Tulane football team as well as LSU throughout the season. Jaquan Jackson is going to be on our show once a week, breaking down film, you name it. So I'm ready to just see it. I mean, we know what they're bringing back. We know what they're capable of, but you don't see it unless you're in a scrimmage format or that first game of the season.
Yeah, and I just keep going back to Mike Detillier, how he put it on the show when he came on, of the trenches playing in pajamas and slippers. I mean, it really is just kind of impossible to tell. It's really why I kind of enjoyed those contact drills today. But to me, I really do think special teams is going to be the secret weapon for Tulane this year. I mean, just thinking about what Greg McMahon, did on an NFL level to bring that into a college program. And then, like I said, just to see a lot more attention paid every day. We were actually just watching them, in the art of long snapping today for like 30 minutes in front of us. I really think that those kind of small changes are getting a little less attention perhaps, but to me are really might be the difference maker, especially when you look at the Southern Miss loss last year, having a blocked punt, a blocked field goal, and a missed field goal, and it being a 3-point loss. Special teams to me is really the hidden key for Tulane.
Yeah, I remember talking to Nick Anderson after he signed with the Saints, and he had a lot of good things to say about Willie Fritz and the fact that he made every player that came through that program play at least 4 different spots on special teams. And I think that's why somebody like Nick Anderson is competing for a spot on the 53-man roster. I don't know if he's proven yet that he deserves a 53-man spot, but he could be a practice squad guy. Dorian Williams, no doubt, is taking those reps with him to Buffalo. And number one, Dorian's length, like he's going to be just fine in Buffalo and in the NFL. But those special teams reps and having that kind of having that in your back pocket of playing multiple positions, it's only going to help because you almost have an edge heading into these NFL training camps where you don't have to relearn something or learn something brand new. They're going in right away and they can kind of just be plugged in and say, all right, have you worked in these roles before? And it's like, yes, we have, because Willie Fritz knows just how important it is to get those reps in special teams in college. And hopefully that will, carry over to the next level for these guys. And it seems like it is, and it has so far.
Yeah, and it might not be something that, is necessary for the guys on the Georgia team, for example, that go in the first couple rounds. They probably can get away with not, needing to have a role in special teams. But to me, I think that's really something that stands out about Tulane and it being a G5 program and there actually being a pathway to the NFL. Because I think, guys just see the flashy lights of that starting role. And just to be honest, that's probably not happening for a majority of guys. But I do think that there is a subset of guys that just never really learn special teams. And then by the time they got to the NFL, it's not really something that they wanted to take on. They wanted to perhaps excel in their role. But I like that you brought that up. I actually didn't know that they're required to play 4 positions. And now I'm almost curious to go kind of watch them do that. But to me, that really is kind of what separates guys that might otherwise not make a roster.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's a requirement for a specific number of positions, but Nick Anderson definitely said, he's like, I've played 4 or 5 different special teams positions in my time at Tulane and how much that's helped him. And the Saints have had him on almost every single special teams drill so far in camp, which that's only going to do good things for Nick Anderson, whether he plays for the Saints or for another NFL team in his future. And again, like you mentioned, it is the pathway to the NFL by getting these guys those snaps and experiences in special teams, because as we know, most group of 5 guys are going to need to be able to bring their game there to hopefully make a roster in the NFL level.
Yeah. And I mean, just like the last couple of seasons alone, I'm really curious to see again what they do this year, because like those guys have gotten quite a bit of experience with fake touchdowns being thrown, a lot of onside kicks. I mean, especially in the 2-10 season, but that makes a huge difference. Like to me, if I'm a special teams guy, the G5 really stands out to me depending on kind of the coach and just the level of creativity that you can have there. Because if you could say that you've, helped with onside kicks, for example, To me, that really translates over to the NFL. But special teams to me has always been more of a mentality thing than a skill thing, because I think it's just kind of an accumulation of a lot of different football skills. So that's probably to me one of the most important things a college coach can instill in those guys is just being able to take a step back and realize that that might be your role, but to be the best that you can at that.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%.
All right. Well, Brooke, is there anything that we have not talked about that you wanted to go over on this?
No, I mean, I think we touched on everything. Of course, I love having another strong female in the sports industry out here. And as you guys know, Maddie does an awesome job. And I can't wait to hear your calls with Tulane this year and the stories that you're going to get to tell. And who knows, maybe Coach Maddie is the future here.
Girl, I cannot agree more. And I am excited that you guys who we're at New Orleans Football will be joining the Green Wave this season.
Absolutely. Roll wave.
Roll Wave. All right, y'all. Again, that was Brooke Kirchhoffer with New Orleans Football. And I couldn't be more thrilled that she was the first woman that was probably long overdue to have on my show. Again, I met her in the Saints press box in 2021. And I believe she was sitting next to Ed Daniels and we started talking and somehow it came up that we both played soccer growing up. And, she played it into college. I took myself out in a pothole, but we kind of just immediately bonded over that athletic background and really being able to relate and empathize with the athletes on the field. And I remember we had gone on a show together. I believe it was Eric Asher's TV show. And we kind of went in on this discussion about hamstring injuries and the like, just because as athletes that have gone through this, also knowing the mental component, I think has really helped me in my coverage. And I can tell how much it shines through in Brooks. And to me, I mean, she was the Louisiana Sportscaster of the Year for a reason. She was someone I looked up to, coming into this industry, just being such a consummate professional to me in everything that she does, but watching her transition over and doing this more analysis type stuff on New Orleans Football, I just couldn't be more proud to be a fellow woman in this industry alongside her. So that's all for this week's Before the Whistle, and I will see you guys back on Tuesday.